Hello, friends. Welcome. My name's Tami Simon. I'm the founder of Sounds True, and it is an utter joy and privilege to be here with you for this webinar with Caroline Myss on the Great Transformation. For those of you who need more of an introduction to Caroline Myss, briefly, she is a world-renowned best-selling author and medical intuitive. She's someone that I consider a friend, both to me and to Sounds True, and she's someone that I look to for sage wisdom, sage advice. And when the pandemic hit a little over a year ago, our team at Sounds True started having conversations. Who could help us understand this time that we're in? How could we deepen our appreciation of what's happening right now and how we are being changed and transformed at this time? Are we actually becoming a new kind of global species? Is that just a myth? What's going on? And members of our team said, you know whose work is really helping me the most? Caroline Myss. I'm watching the videos that she's posting, and she has a lot of insight. We need to make a series with her. Let's focus on this particular time, this turning point. And that's how the Great Transformation, this teaching series with Caroline Myss, came into being. And today in our webinar, I really want to give you a sense of some of the essential insights from that series and give you a taste of it. So with that, please join me in welcoming Caroline Myss. Caroline?
Hello, you.
Hello, friend. You.
It is good to be here.
Okay, let's start. The Great Transformation. I want to get right into it. Okay, enough of the small talk. Let's just get right to it. Some people might say, you know, look, there's always been times of change. Everybody, when they're alive, thinks they're living in the most important time that's ever happened in human history because I'm alive right now, right?
And for them it is.
And for them it is. So what makes this time, in your view, particularly a great time of transformation?
Not just a great time, but the great time of transformation. I think there are cosmic alchemical ingredients that have never been present before. And let's just list them. For one thing, we've never been as globalized as we are. We've never been as actively in communication with each other, both through transportation, let's just start at the ground level, and through internet, and through business, and through economy. So just the basics there. And so we've never been as interconnected intellectually, philosophically. We've never shared ideas as much. We've never had global visions shared by so many people about we could do this, let's build here, let's do here. So we've already begun the melting down of borders through economics. And so that right there, we're transforming how we've done business, how we do business. So we've got that. So let's put that aside because that's like the obvious economic stuff. Now let's go to the energetic stuff. Now, excuse me, when we entered the nuclear age, and now we're going to go to a higher platform of seeing things. So there's the physical way. And then we have to enter into our more imaginative way of thinking that causes a person to, where I'll ask the audience to become reflective. And that's that when we entered the nuclear age, just at the basic level, if I was teaching history, I would say that changed everything about how this world operates. From that point on, when, as Prometheus, we stole the nuclear fire, the history of our world could be rewritten by who has the fire. Does Russia have the fire? Then the Soviet Union? Does India have the fire? Pakistan, North Korea? Everything is about who has the fire and who's going to use the fire. That birth of the capacity to destroy ourselves was a signal to our evolutionary forces that we'd become a species driven by, capable of, and in fear of destroying our own habitat. So while I will now proceed by crediting that to higher intelligence, holy intelligence, you could also proceed by saying evolution itself, the inherent species intelligence, felt the signal that something has to be done for our own survival. And that activated a sense of we have to become somehow or other incapable of using the weapons that we have just unleashed because we will not survive. And that activated an acceleration in our basic design. And so you could say that our nuclear-sized senses exploded or awakened. And that activated the era of psychic forces within us and around us. Our energetic era had begun. Now, you could say that's just ordinary change. No, it's not. That was the beginning of a huge transformation in how we relate to ourselves, relate how we perceive instead of just see. We are becoming perceptive. Instead of just hearing, we're becoming sensory creatures. We are becoming transparent. We require a whole different form of medical treatment now. We're beginning to get the laws of the universe in a very different way. The first being holistic, all life breathes together. We've redefined how we engage in health, that we have to approach ourselves holistically. Now, the fact that we are seeing ourselves holistically becomes a new template for how we have to approach the whole, because one absolute law is what is in one is in the whole. How I approach myself in order for my health to survive is the law of how we have to approach the whole. That is a whole new concept of how to live together. So it's obvious that this holism mantra, this holism mandate, is the route to survive our own impending destruction. Secondly, as a global community, moving into that is altering our myths of the gods, because our template of the gods is that in order, if you're in this religion, all the other religions are wrong. That collides with holistic health, because in order to be healthy, you have to be whole, and you can't nurture within you this idea of superiority, this idea of separatism. So right there, we have to dismantle the core of religion, but not the mystical truths in religion. And the mystical truths in all religion lifts us to a level of spirituality where we are dealing with now all the cosmic laws that all traditions teach, but that are hidden within. Religion is the politics of God. So it's time now to dismantle the politics and get to the core mystical truths, where if I taught that and said to you, Tami, which religion teaches what goes around comes around, the law of karma, as it is in heaven, so it is on earth, all of them, because these are cosmic laws. So we are moving into the era where we will understand the divine is law, natural law, cosmic law, bio-spiritual ecology will be the next theology. So when you say, what's different about this transformation, we are also facing the reality that we need to transition from fossil power to solar. That in fact, if we look at solar power, we're looking at endless energy. Whereas we look at fossil, we're looking at limited. Limited makes us, brings out what I would call the 7 deadly sins, the selfishness, the this, it's not enough to, oh my gosh, we could have it all in abundance. Abundance thinking and equality causes us to, the Rubicon we have to cross is so big. It's all about getting over our fear of empowering other people instead of believing our survival is based on keeping power from them. So we are now facing cosmic size mystical questions that really has brought heaven to our door.
Now, in this series, Caroline, you teach on 7 awakenings, 7 dawning realizations that are influencing and shaping us as individuals and as a collective. And, we spend about 2 hours on each of these awakenings. So, we can barely scratch the surface here, but I want to talk about a couple of them. And one is this awakening from external power to the power of creation. And the reason I want to bring this forward is that you say co-creation is the central dictate of our time, our power to be co-creators in this great transformation. And I think a lot of people feel like, there's some things I can have creative power over, but there's so much I can't. So much I can't. I actually feel powerless in this kind of situation that relates to a social issue or this kind of environmental issue. I don't feel very powerful. So talk to me about how I can be a powerful co-creator, especially when I feel situations are outside of my control.
Well, let's just start with how one even understands co-creation. It's not a mental idea about what I can have, which is how capitalism defines it. There's elements of capitalism and selfishness and Santa Claus in there. Co-creation is a mystical power. It is rooted in understanding that every breath you take, every choice you make, every thought you have is an act of co-creation. Every single thing. Oh, Tami.
Yes.
Where are you?
I'm still right here. Right with you, Caroline. And you're with me.
Can you see me?
I can.
Okay, I can't see you. My screen is gone. Okay, so I'm just going to keep talking.
Let's fly in the dark. I can see you and you sound good.
Okay, great. So every single choice is an act of creation. Every single one. Every word you say, every breath you take, every response you have to everyone. So it begins with understanding that co-creation is that energy precedes the creation of matter. And we are always energizing something and sending it into an act of creation. So that even the slightest reaction we have to someone in the privacy of our heart is a profound act of creation. Now that's a whole new model of life. And when co-creation is reduced to what can I have, what can I do when I look at the size of a riot on the street, how can I possibly change that? That's thinking in terms that co-creation is a matter of money. It's a matter of external power. And you're not understanding at all that co-creation starts with understanding that all you do is co-create. Every thought you have to start with, how is it that I see my world? How do I talk to myself? What words do I use? And what's the power in my vocabulary? And I honestly have seen, in my experience as a medical intuitive, what I realized is how often someone could not get out get off the hamster's wheel of pain and suffering because they did not understand the power of the vocabulary they were using. They consciously did not. And they refused to let go of the negative vocabulary because they feared the power of the positive vocabulary. And that goes to show, that proved to me again and again that in our inherent knowledge that we're born with, we know the power of every word we choose to say and every word we choose to use to frame the experiences we are having or the experiences we want to have. So that co-creation actually begins by the deep process of self-knowledge and self-awareness and looking at how shall I look at this situation? What words do I choose to see this? I can transform the world I'm in by what words the lens through which I see this. I don't require outside money. I don't require any of this. If I say to myself, what can I do? I need to transform that question to, but how shall I see this? But how shall I think about this? What words do I need to release that are draining me and hemorrhaging of my capacity to see this in a different way?
Let's get specific, Caroline, because you said as a medical intuitive, you saw examples of this. Give me an example of someone who was using a certain vocabulary with themselves that was keeping the person stuck and not healing.
Well, the classic would be woundology. When someone insists on staying within the power of the wound language and using the word but you don't understand, but you just don't have all the facts, but it would be so difficult. The but language, the always finding excuses for not proceeding with an empowering vocabulary, such as, yes, I'll do that. I will. And the two words that are really, there's a vocabulary that completely drains a person without a doubt. But, try, deserve, blame, entitled. Those words, that but, try, deserve, blame, and entitled. Those 5 words will drain you of all your power. And that's how much power you have. When we talk about transforming a situation, you can transform so much in your life by deciding, I'm not going to include those words in how I talk to myself. If someone said to you, I'll tell you what, why don't you use this discipline to heal? Get up in the morning and the first thing, honestly, make your bed. Just make your bed. Create a healing environment around you. Walk, do something to move your body, to do something positive. If you respond with but, you're already sabotaging. It's a strong saboteur. And you promise yourself, I'm not going to say that anymore. I'm not going to fight a positive suggestion. I'm going to say, okay, all right, I'll do it. I may not want to do it, but I will. I will cross that Rubicon and engage in thoughts and in words that have the capacity to transform me. And if I can transform a part of me that is sabotaging my power, then that transformation engages different currents of health.
Caroline, when we created this series, The Great Transformation, together, I had the great opportunity to ask you questions at the end of each of these awakenings that you taught on. And then I had a chance to ask you some questions. And one of the things that I really kept wanting to put under a magnifying glass is your work as a medical intuitive and what the patterns are that you see and how some of your insights came from seeing those patterns. And at one point you were talking about psychic weights that people carry with them throughout their life, grievances about the past. And you said it's not so much what happens to people, but it's how they view what happens to them that really matters. And that was a moment for me. That was like all these bells started ringing when you said that to me. That it's not so much what happens, it's how you view what happens. And I want to share this because afterwards I went and I thought about a very painful experience in my own very, very, very early life, first few months of my life, the way I'd been telling that story over and over, the way I'd been viewing it. And I'd created a whole world around it. And I came up after being inspired by this great transformation series of It Naturally Happened, of re-envisioning it as an actual launching pad for my life, that this event was actually, and that anyway, so I think this is such an important point, and I want to understand how, as a medical intuitive, you came to this realization that it's how we see the event that is really the important thing.
Well, excuse me, I eventually, and it was a long track, Tami, I refused to take that position, when people would say, why is God doing this to me? Why is God doing this to me? I do not have, I cannot buy this idea that there is some off-planet God that sends us trials and difficulties and is doing things to us, this very Christian notion. I just don't buy that. And through the years of my life, I've really come to believe that this universe is very impersonal, and yet very intimate. So both are true. And therein lies the holy paradox. And so when I look through that first huge cosmic lens, that life is an incredibly impersonal journey in which the events that happen to us, while many at the intimate level are deeply painful, they're not personal. But what they do have, but they form a kind of commonality, that this is what human beings experience. That so long as there is fear, and so long as there is greed, so long as there is vengeance, these experiences are going to exist in abundance. And none of us is safe or immune from these experiences flowing in and out of our own lives. And so from that point of view, experiences can be seen as, in the Buddhist language, impersonal, just totally impersonal. What matters is how we respond to them. And I acknowledge here that a great many of life experiences are extremely difficult to see impersonally. Theft, murder, rape. I mean, none of this feels impersonal. None of it does, because it's quite intimate and quite personal when things happen. Incest, violations, they're horrible. And yet, at another level, and this is where that incredible journey of the soul comes in. You have to stand in that moment and say, this is either going to make me incredibly bitter, or I have to get better. I don't have another choice here. I can either believe I'm the only one that this has ever happened to, or I can say this is what happens in the human experience because there is darkness and no light. Now, which am I? And both are pain, both are difficult, but one is a route to pain the rest of your life, to suffering the rest of your life. And the other is painful because you have to work your way through cracking this small, transforming yourself from this notion that you're the only one who's ever. and that you're this somehow or other, justice belongs to you. And that's a major part of this, that justice, you'll spend the rest of your life looking for justice and getting your comeuppance. Or you look and think, I have to transform myself from this craving because I think I'm the center of the universe, because I think I'm the only one this has ever happened to. I have to find a way out of that sense of entitlement that my life should have been otherwise, and find my way to the journey of life itself, to the journey of there's other forces in life, to the journey through that door of forgiveness. And that is the burning fire of transformation. I have to not let the experiences that happen to me make me into the experience I had that turned me into this. I cannot become vengeful and bitter and all of that. I cannot. And somehow that is a test that finds its way to all human beings. And that is the fodder for transformation. And there.
Okay, there's one more thing about this central dictate of our time, co-creation. You said in this series, absolutely everything we think, say, and do is recorded by the universe, even microscopic details.
Yeah.
What gives you such absolute confidence that that's actually happening?
Isn't that astonishing? Because of what I saw in human beings in medical intuitive readings. I believe now that this path of mine as a medical intuitive was actually a spiritual path in disguise. Because I learned more about the soul, the spirit, and human nature, and the nature of God by doing these readings than whatever service I provided to the thousands of people I've done readings for. But it was for all of the study and all the years I spent studying theology and the Eastern philosophy and all of that. None of it taught me the reverence for the intimacy of God in our blood and bones that I saw as I learned human consciousness through one reading after another. And I saw the power we had that is so evident in how we influence this form that we reside in, how our thoughts, our fears, the power of love, the power of generosity, the power of faith influences not just the form we reside in, but the greater form we inhabit. And how every single tiny thought, every single tiny reaction has an impact. And so you brought up psychic weight. And that when I would do readings, I would have this sense of someone being anchored in something they couldn't let go of, in a thought form that possessed them, like I was entitled to this, or a thought form that I need to be better than this one, or a power play, or all the things people get anchored in, a resentment of another person, or a thought form like procrastination, and that leads to self-hate, that leads to self-resentment. And if you resent yourself, you will project that resentment onto others. You will resent others because self-resentment builds in you and you have to vomit it out. And the way you vomit it out is to target another person. I'm this way because of you. So you will always have a bad childhood, because that's the only way you can tolerate what's going on in you, is to create someone who did this to you. And how every one of those thoughts was this anchor, and it created a consequence, and it was a psychic weight, WEIGHT. And that the more weight you had, the more psychic weight you amassed in your field, the more the more you had to wait, WAIT, for things to happen, the denser you were. And eventually I realized that's how we kind of negotiate our experience of time and space. The more weight we have, the longer, more time is required for things to unfold in our life because we're so anchored. And if you think about that, and I would sit with someone and I would say, you know, in order for you to heal, you have to really think about leaving your job. It's too much pressure. That pressure is working on your system. You have to find something else, and all the things that somebody would suggest. You have to deal with your stresses. And I would look at them and watch them immediately go to their anchors and say, yeah, but that would mean I would have to change this and this and this and this. So they run it through their anchor system, and then they report back in. And what they're actually talking to me about is, I don't want my life to change that fast. So it's a time problem they have. I don't want change to move that fast in my life. That's much too fast. Whereas somebody else would say, oh, all right, I'll change that. I'll change this habit, that habit. Okay, all right, fine, no problem. And what that person will immediately experience is that's the person that says, I feel so much lighter. And things start moving for that person because the laws of cause and effect and action and reaction are moving with more rapidity or more speed, because that person now has all that energy back in present time. So a thought can go into form much faster. An insight is recognized much faster, and that person can respond to that insight and make a choice much faster. And now they've recalibrated their actual experience of time and space. They don't require as much time. Synchronicity engages, coincidence happens. The laws begin to snap, crackle, and pop because they're not anchored in this density. And that density anchors in your cell tissue, and it makes you need more time for medicine to work. So instead of being able to heal with more light, at the speed of light, in vertical time, you require the hours and the days and the months that are labeled on bottled medicine because you're so anchored in you're so densified.
Why do you think, Caroline, it's scary for so many of us to let go of our weight, WEIGHT, and to let go of waiting and to come fully into present time? You say that mystics live in present time. Why is that? People say they want it. They sure like talking about it, but it seems like many people are actually afraid to actually do it.
I think that's a multi-layered answer. I think that it's an interesting thing. I think people are terrified of the speed of truth and a relationship with truth and becoming clear. I think for some reason, for a lot of reasons, the clarity and truth is considered a very sharp sword because people take cover in darkness and in the shadow and in denial and in their capacity to say things that are not true and then excuse that behavior. And truth is clarity, and you have to say what you mean and mean what you say. And then truth opens up in you self-truth, deeper truth, and where you then are called to be more courageous. You're called to be more integrous. You're called to live at a much more authentic level of empowerment. And that changes this equation where the love of power demands that you change to the power of love. And the love of power begins to disintegrate, which is what drives most people in their initial stages in life, where they're driven by this love of power, the need for security, the need for stuff, the need for position, the need for acknowledgement. And they're afraid to empower other people. They're terrified of it. They're afraid to acknowledge that they sense the vulnerabilities in other people, because then they have to make decisions based on that equation. The power of love. I'll tell you what I actually think these days, because I never stop praying or dwelling on these questions these days. But I think love is the name, the word that we give to experiencing, touching the power of God. And that it's so profound a power, it's so exquisite a power that we take it in small doses, and we allow ourselves to sense that love with very few people in very deep ways. Our family, our children, our mates. And oftentimes our mates not that fully, because look at how often we change mates. But there are very few instances in life where a person really loves another human being unconditionally. That's the bond with parents and children, is that because there is a safety net with loving your own children. It is this biological safety net. But knowing how love can empower another person or disempower them makes it the greatest power you have. And you know it, which is why human beings spend so much time regulating how this power flows from them and creating these narratives that you can't direct this power toward people who don't look like you. You can't direct this power toward people who don't believe things that you do. You've got to be very careful with this power. You've got to be very, very careful. And we have to go to therapy to learn how to regulate this power and to recover from when that power was denied to us. Now, we don't require therapy to launch hate at anybody. We do that without discrimination. Boom, anger, boom, no problem. We don't have any therapy to let that go without discrimination. But when it comes to love, we have to regulate it so tightly, because we know that the power of love is somehow so transformational. Again, that word, that if we really let it flow through us without this requisite, you don't meet my requisites. If we get that it's not about personal, it's an impersonal force that has intimate consequences. It's totally impersonal. Compassion, kindness, where you say to yourself, I am not going to have these restrictions. It doesn't do me any harm to look at humanity and just say, bless them. May God just flow kindness and mercy. Have mercy on these people that are trying so hard to make their way in the world. Have mercy on them. Just let this love flow from you. It is impersonal, and get over the fear of empowering other people as if it's going to cost you something in your life. A rising tide lifts all ships. All life breathes together. When will we get that message?
So, interestingly, Caroline, as we were recording these 7 different awakenings that mix in our personal process with the collective process, I said to you, can we have one session that's just dedicated to a practice of some kind, where we just do a practice together? And you're like, sure, we can do that. And then you came up with a practice, and as you introduced it, you said, we're not going to meditate, wink, wink, Tami, who records all these meditation practices. We're not going to meditate, but we're going to activate. And I really liked that. And you called this the practice of empowering others. And I want to hear more about that, how our listeners right now could start engaging in the practice of empowering others.
Well, I think that there comes a point where a person, again, has to cross over and realize that you're either a taker or a giver. You're either here to be of service to the betterment of life. And service is not about bringing blankets to people who are cold or feeding the hunger. I mean, you could define service in that way.
Seems reasonable to do that, to bring blankets to people who are cold.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But then as soon as you go home, you're not of service anymore. And then there's occupations that are long-serving, rich, deep occupations. I consider among them nurses and teachers and doctors and healers and social workers, of course, the typical, and dare I add, good policemen. But there's also, we are in the age of the soul, and we are in the age of energy. And this is a truth people are not accustomed to weaving into their everyday life or everyday decisions. They don't live in the world of energy. They live in the world of technology. So they know the energetic technology, but they do not acknowledge, nor live, nor abide by, nor have a reverence for what it means to live in and as an energetic being, that if you really understood energy, you would recognize you're living in a field of grace, and that you are alive by the grace of God. That this is, you breathe grace, that it is your life force, and that it is this grace that you infuse into every choice you make that activates that choice. And that your power begins by the activation of a choice. And if you don't believe it, you should test yourself and observe yourself and look at how frightened you are to make so many choices, and ask yourself why. Why are you so afraid to make a choice, to answer a question? When how many times I'll ask somebody a question in a workshop and they can't even answer a yes or a no question. They're terrified to just give a full-bodied answer to something, because they know in their heart of hearts that even to answer a question is to set patterns of change in motion, if only because they've acknowledged something to themselves. So you realize I am an energetic being that is constantly adding to the flow of life. And I need to include others in the consequence of my decisions and how I think and how I am, because what everyone needs to recognize is that the influence of everybody else is pressing upon them. And I don't think people actually think that they live on islands and that the energetics of all of life, they're afraid of pollution in the air that they can see and smell. Oh my God, I smell smoke. Oh my God, I smell this. But they don't get that energetic psychic pollution, psychic free radicals are coming at them 24/7 as well. That in fact, they're absorbing the collective stress and the collective madness that is absolutely in the atmosphere. And that there comes a point where you have to realize I am part of an inner net, just like the internet. I'm part of an internet. And so part of my life practice, my holy practice, is to pray for grace, that it filters into the internet on behalf of the whole. It's like the collective immune system, and that you see yourself as a molecule of grace that's pouring into the collective. And this, you start thinking in terms of being part of the whole, an active agent of the whole, an active change agent in the whole. And that's how you begin to recognize, too, you start attuning yourself to sensing the influence from the whole.
Okay, but Caroline, in terms of this practice of empowering others, the choice to be a vehicle for grace in situations, I'm curious to know, what are choice points that
I think,
people, like there's a moment I could go this way, I could go that way.
Well, let's just say you're in a, let's put it down on the ground level, and you're in a dialogue with someone. And oftentimes dialogues become tense or intense or a little stressful. And it doesn't matter. You could be with a good friend, and they say something that just activates a vulnerability in you, like, why couldn't I have this? Why? And as a matter of fact, I just came across this because my niece just got engaged, one of my nieces. And she got a splendid engagement ring, and she's madly in love with her partner, and they are with each other, and it's sweet. And sure enough, someone said, why couldn't it happen to me? Now, how often, I remember going to college and hearing that later, and there's that sense of, I just have to take a little bit of power and joy out of this situation because I can't bear all that joy going to them. There's movies on jealousy of bridesmaids. And it's exactly that situation, or whether that's at work or something romantic or something hostile, where you have to step back and say, this moment is not about my life path. It's about their life path. And I'm meeting them on this life path. And maybe I would be better served if I blessed what's happening to them rather than resent it. If in fact, I am called to empower them instead of disempower them, which would disempower me. Maybe that's a better use of my power, because the resentment creates, the resentment creates an anchor, a psychic anchor, and that will cause me to hemorrhage, and somehow in their field, they'll feel it, because we are transparent to each other now. We sense it. There'll be a pinch, like a little bit of too much salt in a recipe, and you'll wonder, where did it come from? And you'll realize it was that person. And it's exactly those types of situations when you see somebody, or when even like in the empowerment of listening to someone's idea, and you realize they're trying to birth an idea, and you sense in your intuitive system how it could be better. And watch yourself. Watch whether or not you've got what it takes to say, I'll tell you how you could help this out. Or if you're interested, I'd like to give you a perspective. And if you can use it, you can use it. If not, with the hands off, instead of saying, what's in it for me? Or if I give them this idea, I know it's going to succeed. And then where will I be? The idea that of being able to help another person to their max, and challenging the idea that helping another is lessening you, getting rid of that either or, and breaking through that pettiness is exactly what I'm talking about.
Why do you think, Caroline, so many times people hold back? They withhold. They're not going to give that, like, I have a contact that would be really helpful, but I don't want you to benefit from my contact. Nope, sorry.
Because I think, I know, I don't have to think. People equate empowerment with money and with security and with fame and success and all of that. And they think there's a limited amount of that. Look at the world is built. The world is built on that limited belief. And here's the thing, Tami. I mean, if we create our own reality, dismantling that grand, huge human illusion that there's not enough to go around and replacing it with the higher truth that what I do for one, I do for all. Replacing it with a higher truth of how we interact with each other, that we together could co-create a whole different planetary relationship with abundance. We would create from that reality. But we're so terrified of empowering people who don't look like us, who aren't like us. They'll take more than us. Oh my God. I mean, and we are primates this way. We're just primates.
We're terrified of empowering members of our own family and friends as well, not just people who seem different than us.
So is it any wonder we continue to have wars and destruction? We can't even empower people we love. We can't even do that.
Now, just to make this really explicit, why is this practice of empowering others, in your view, such a critical, I might call it linchpin, such a critical practice for the great transformation that we're in right now? Why is this so key? Yeah.
Because it is so difficult for each person to actually do that. Because of what it requires a person go through within themselves, to look at why they fear empowering others and how much in themselves they have to agree to dismantle and change. And it takes them from the love of power into the power of love. It initiates that journey, because once you take a look at I have this fear of empowering others, and furthermore, my decisions are based on that calculation. I don't make my decisions based on wisdom. I don't make my decisions based on what will serve the whole. I make my decisions on what will keep power from another person. And at the same time, I consider myself loving. How can that be? I'm terrified of the power of love, because if I wasn't, I would make my decisions based on what is the most loving thing I can do. And you don't realize it's also a supreme act of the real meaning of self-love. To say, look at how I recognize my own creative, unbelievable creativity. I can create for anybody. I'm like a creative wizard. That person needs help, I'll help them out. That person needs help, I'll help them out. And it's not always with a what do you call it? Price tag on it. You know, I help them out because they're sitting here in my life right now. This question came up, and I can intuitively see a better path.
So, Caroline, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, if you don't think heaven sees that, and that too engages in the laws of cause and effect, that too sets blessings in motion. People don't get that those actions are watched and blessed.
At the beginning of our conversation, Caroline, I said, is this really just our great time of transformation, or a truly great one in human history? And you said it's the great time of transformation. And you took us back to the beginning of the nuclear age. And you said that catalyzed in us a need to become a species incapable of using these weapons of mass destruction that we now possess, a species incapable of using them. And I thought to myself, really? Is that going to happen? Is that going to happen, that we're going to become a species incapable of using these weapons of mass destruction? That seems like quite a journey from where we are to that point. How will we become that kind of species?
Well, I'm not, as you know, an idealist, and I'm not an optimist, and I'm not a pessimist. I'm a hardcore realist. And so we don't become better without first really, truly encountering the consequences of what happens if we don't. We're not a species that learns without experience of why we need to do something. So I suspect, Tami, that we're going to choose the path of woe instead of wisdom. That I look at what's happening in our country and how people are just getting saturated with lies and they know it, and it's fine with them. And it's not a Republican or Democrat thing. I don't care who is telling the lies. But when lies are being perpetrated and there's whole people that know it, but they're okay with it for personal gain, and it has reached epidemic proportions. And there's such a blatant lack of ethics and morals and standards. You know that wheels have been set in motion that are heading us toward catastrophic consequences, and not just here, but in other places. And so I don't think we're going to get to a loftier goal without losing a lot of what we're used to. I think the pandemic was and is this kind of explosion. We've been expecting something to come along for a long time. For a long time. Look at how our movies were. There's a pandemic coming. There's an epidemic coming. There's an invasion coming. There's all these movies about people, let's get off the earth. There's nothing left. We've been expecting something for a very long time. We've been expecting the end of how we know it, but we don't know where we're going. We don't know where we're going. All we can envision in our movies and our collective and our zombies and the dead walking, The Walking Dead. All we can envision is end, but we can't envision the new. We have all these wealthy people building bunkers underground to survive because they can't figure out where to send the rockets to a planet. Well, we'll just go to Mars. As if, what are you going to do there? What the hell are you going to do there? We'll just go ruin that planet. But we have to be able to envision ourselves as a cooperative, undestructive species, and we can't seem to get there. We cannot seem to get there.
Let's get there right now. Let's get there right now, you and me, in this conversation with our listeners, because you talk about how collectively we can go through the door of woe or the door of wisdom. And I'm committed to helping us go through the door of wisdom. Well, let's do that.
We've done this series, and what other things we do in the future, individually, collectively, the whole point is that every single person who makes the decision to become an active agent that's part of the whole, and whether they live that holism in their prayers and in their thoughts, they start living with the reality that everything I do, every choice I make, it doesn't matter that you don't get how it works. You don't get how medicine works either, but when you pop it in your body, you trust that it does. You have to live with that same idea that how I breathe affects the whole. How I think about every person I see affects the whole. And I just have to pray that way. And that, hover over me, God, fill me with grace and fill this planet with grace. Help us make us through this transformation. And that is how we live.
You mentioned at one point towards the end of the series that we need a holy escort to enter into oneness. And that really stayed with me, Caroline. So this vision of this new interconnected species that is incapable of destroying ourselves because we know in every part of us our oneness. We need a holy escort to go there. We need a prayer life to go there. Maybe we can end on that note. Why? Why can't we just, hey, me and my separate self and my ego, we're going to go there? No, I need a holy escort.
I think we do. We need to pray. We need to have a relationship with the holy world that is past the narratives in religion, where you simply understand that there is a greater force that you dwell in. This whole universe is this force that if you could, when you die, you're going to leave your body and slip into light. And that light is God. You've always been dwelling in that light. Always. So there is no off-planet God that looks like a man. You are always dwelling within the light. And that's what it means to realize I am this creature of light, and I'm going to engage in this light and pull it into me while I'm here.
I want to thank you, Caroline, for this introduction for people to the series, The Great Transformation. I don't know if you can hear, it's thundering and raining here where I am in Boulder, Colorado. If you hear that, the thunder sounds a little bit like trumpets to me. Introducing The Great Transformation, 7 inner awakenings that are changing you and the world. 7 inner awakenings and a final practice session on the practice of empowering others. I have to say, I listened to the series once when I recorded it with Caroline, and then a second time going through and creating the online workbook. And each time I had literally life-changing insights, insights that will leave me forever different as a person. And I want to welcome you to join us. You can just hit the Learn More button on this page and let us walk through the wisdom door together. Caroline, thank you. Thanks as always for your straight talk and your great love and generosity. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, sweetie. Thank you for your years of friendship.
Sounds true. Waking up the world. Thanks for being with us.